And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here, and today we're going to check out a two-player game from Z-Man Games. It's actually a reprint of a game that's been out for quite some time. It's in the Cosmos line, and that game is Babel. Now, Babel is a game in which you're trying to build up different types of temples. You're moving from site to site, playing your different armies, trying to protect these temples and get different abilities from them, and trying to have enough forces to build up the different levels one by one, from 1 to 6. And it's going to be a race to the end. You're trying to have more victory points or more temple levels than your opponent before they can get to a certain point, or more at the end of the game if there's a sudden death or the temples run out. Anyhow, real quick, why don't we just take a look at what you get inside of this box with the new components and how things look. We'll see how the game plays, and at the end I'll come back here and I'll give you my opinions of Babel. So here we can see the components for Babel all set up. This is a game about building out different monuments, or building out different pyramids, stacked layers of buildings, whatever you want to call them, on these different build sites. Each build site having its own color: red, green, gray, blue, and yellow. Each player is going to start the game with a level 1, a first level of a building, and they're going to start the game with some cards and a token that they're going to move between these different sites in order to play their different types of troops on them to build various things. Now, each of these troops has a special ability. We'll see that blue's ability is destroy a temple. We'll see that the yellow's ability is going to be steal one temple level. When you steal this level, it doesn't actually have to go on to the appropriate starting level. So I could steal level 4 and put it on top of a level 1, or steal level 4 and put it on top of a level 0. Desertion from green is going to let you get rid of some of your opponent's troops that are on the other side. So if you get some of these in a row, you use one of them, you can force some of their guys to run away. We're going to have skip a temple level, which will allow you to build a 3 on top of a 1, or a 4 on top of a 2. And red will be change camps, which will allow you to move some of your opponent's guys from their side of the board to your side of the board, of course, giving you more cards. So each one of these has a different color. Now, on your turn, you're going to start with some cards. The first player 3, the second player 5. And the first thing you'll do on each of your turns is draw more cards. You're going to draw 3 to add to your hand. When you draw these, you're then going to look at your hand and you're going to see what you have. So our player has 3 yellow cards and 3 green cards. That's kind of convenient. But they're going to go ahead and take their turn with these cards. What they can do is they can take several actions after they draw, and the actions are going to be somewhat like the ones you're about to see here. The first thing you can do is you can move your pawn anywhere out here by playing the corresponding color card. So maybe our player plays a yellow card, discarding it, and moving themselves to the yellow camp. You'll see each camp has 2 different spots for each pawn, so both players can be at the same camp at the same time if they decide to be. They can then play as many cards as they like from their hand to this campsite. Doing so is going to allow them to build levels, and for each card you have there, you may build a bigger level. 1 card will let you build a level 1, 2 cards a level 2, 3 cards a level 3, and so forth and so on. So maybe our player decides to play 1, 2, 3 green cards here. Why? Because they want to. They don't really need to play all 3 because they can only build level 1 this turn, but they decide to do so just in case their opponent plays some cards, and they can make them desert later. Not really a great play. Probably be better to hold on to some of them and play these later, but they're going to do it anyway for illustration purposes. Now that they've got at least 1 card out here, they can build level 1, so they're going to place that there. There's no cost to building it. They don't have to discard any cards. They simply place the level there, and if there was a level 2 available, they could build that, and a level 3, if it was available, they could build that. Now they have 2 cards remaining, and they could play these 2 yellow cards if they wanted. They can't really discard them to move them to yellow, and they can't really do much of anything else, but there is an action you can always take on your turn. It's called Migration, and that allows you to move the top 3 cards of any of your stacks to any other site. You can always move 3 cards. They don't have to be the same, but you must move 3, and you can move them from one site to another. This is important because sometimes you'll really want to use the effects of one of your guys, but you'll want to use it somewhere else. So you can move them around and basically have them available, but only once per turn. Once this player is done with their turn, they're going to flip over the top 2 cards of the temple deck. And they're going to see that they get a 3 and a 2 in that order. Now these 2 cards will always get stacked with the lower card on top, 2, then 3. The next turn, if we have these cards still out there, we'll see we draw a 5 and a 6. In this case, the 5 would go on top of the 6, but we're not going to reorganize the 2 and the 3. So the pile would go 5, 6, 2, 3. You only reorganize them when you initially draw them. Once we're done with this, we're going to pass the turn to the other player, and that player is going to draw their 3 cards. When they draw their 3 cards, they're going to go ahead and look at their hand. They have some blues, some reds, and some grays. Actually, pretty nice hand. Now, what they want to do is they're going to want to move to one of these sites. So, maybe they're going to go ahead and they're going to move to the red site. They'll play a red card from their hand and move their pawn over here to their red spot. Now, they can choose which of these cards they want to play, and they can actually build a level 1, then a level 2, and then a level 3. Always only able to take the top card of any stack, but they have a 2 and then a 3, so they can do it in order. What they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and they're going to play their 3 gray cards out here. 1, 2, 3. Now that they've got those out there, they're going to go ahead and they're going to continue on, and they're going to build their level 1, because they have at least 1 guy. After that, they can build the level 2, because they have at least 2 guys. And then they can build the level 3, because they have at least 3 guys out on the board. Now, they have several extra cards left. They don't want to move to red, and they may not even want to move to blue, so they may hold on to all of these cards. They could migrate their Persians from here over to yellow, for example, but if they do so on the opponent's turn, that opponent's just going to use their desertion. Why don't we do that? We'll show a migration. Terrible play, but you can see how activating an ability works in the opponent's turn. So, they decide to migrate these over here. Who knows what their reasoning is, but they're then going to go ahead and they're going to draw their endgame cards, or end turn cards, the 5 and the 6 that we saw earlier. Note, they cannot use the abilities of these cards because their pawn isn't there. If they had a way to move this pawn over to here, they could build a level 2 if it were available, because they have a skip a level card. But there's no level 2 available, they don't have a card to move their pawn, so they're simply out of luck. We then draw 3 cards for our first player here. He adds them to our hand, and we can see how we activate abilities. So, in order to activate ability, you must have 3 of the same type of card in a row, and your pawn must be at the location that you want to use it at. In this case, we have 3 greens in a row. We could play cards over these greens. It doesn't matter. We can still activate them by taking the top card of the greens, discarding it, and activating the ability. So let's say, for example, that we did that for some unknown reason. We decided to play a blue card over this. We then decided to activate our greens by discarding the Medes card here, the top one. We only lose one of them. It goes to the discard pile, and that triggers a desertion. This desertion is going to be of gray, so we're going to force this player to desert all of their grays, which are going to get discarded, and unfortunately they made a terrible play and they lost those cards. Our player could then move around as they see fit, so maybe they want to move to blue. They're going to play a blue card, they're going to move over to blue, and they're going to play some more cards. Maybe they play one of these Hittites. They don't have a level 1 to play, so they don't really have a building to happen to go through here. So they're going to end their turn, and they would discard the top 2 cards here into their own pile, a 3 on top of a 6, and it would pass back to this player. The game will end in one of 3 ways. Essentially, when one player reaches 15 total value of tempo levels they have built out on the board, either through building them or stealing them or whatever the case may be, they're going to check how many tempo level points their opponent has. If they have 9 or less, the player who got past 15 is going to win automatically. Otherwise, the opponent will have 10 or more, which will trigger the end game. This is basically a sudden death scenario where if one player manages to get over 20 points, that player will win automatically. Otherwise, the other player, or one player, will go below 9 points, 9 or below, and that player will automatically lose. Now, there's another way the game can end pretty much abruptly, and that's if this tempo pile runs out. If we manage to go through the whole game back and forth, stealing back and forth, destroying temples, and we get through this whole temple deck, the game will end immediately, and whoever has the most tempo levels will be the winner. So, basically, you're going to want to try and balance back and forth. Make sure that your opponent can't get above 15 while you're below 10. Make sure that if you are above 10 when 15 is reached, you can get back above your opponent to reach 20 first, or not fall below 9, and whoever best does this back and forth will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Babel, the 2-player card game / tempo building game from Z-Man. And I said this is a reprint, so it's a Cosmos line game. And it falls into that line pretty well, which are usually relatively easy to learn, easy to play, but strategic 2-player games, things like Kahuna and other games like that. Now, this one is very, very what I would call intense or conflict-driven compared to some of the other ones, which tend to be a little bit more passive. In this one, you're moving around, you're building up those temples, but you always have to be wary that somebody's going to swoop in and destroy your temple, and that can happen in a turn. There's very little you'll be able to do about it if they've been holding the cards up. Now, the way to avoid this is to try and strategically move yourself around, not to build too big of a temple all at once that could get destroyed, but to be prepared to do that if the cards fall in the right order. You need to move in and build up so that you can get to that 15-point mark before your opponent hits 9. If you don't think you're going to be the leader in that scenario, you need to be ready to destroy your opponent's different temples, especially their higher level temples, in order to stop them from essentially, getting to that point and beating you straight out. So spreading yourself a little bit more across the board may be a better strategy than trying to focus in one area. But that's really going to depend game from game. And so I'd like to say that the game is swingy. It's very, very swingy at times. You're going to start out and you think, okay, I'm ahead, but on the next turn, you could have one of your temples destroyed and go from having 9 points to having 3. And then you could have your opponent build a huge temple, and all types of things could change from turn to turn. So you've got to be very careful to spread yourself out, not have too much focused in one area, but be ready to pounce if the opportunity presents itself. A very mean, but very swingy game. With that said, I enjoy the game. I like it quite a bit. It's a 2-player game that probably won't stay in our collection for too long, but one that I do enjoy playing, and I think is one of my favorite of the Cosmos-type 2-player games. That is Babel.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.